Welcome in all. Hello all, as you're coming in, please let us know a little bit about who is joining us. If you can share in the chat where you're joining us from, what's your grade level of focus, what role do you serve within your school or district? We'll get started in just a moment. We'll give everybody a chance to join us as we're all coming in. Oh, great. I'm seeing a lot of people coming in. A couple of familiar faces. Thanks all for joining us today. As you're coming in, please drop in the chat a little bit about your role, your grade level of focus, what district you're joining us from. We'd love to know more about who is with us today so we can tailor our conversation to exactly what is most meaningful for you. We have some CTE supervisors, STEM, computer science. Great to see a variety of perspectives with us. Career development. Great. We have some classroom teachers. Wonderful to see everybody represented all the way from the classroom up to the district CTE and STEM departments from all over. Wonderful. Please do drop in if you haven't yet a little bit of information about who you are, where you're joining us and your roles so that we can keep an eye on what perspectives are with us here in the webinar today and what would be the most meaningful for your time and your application of STEM. Today we're going to talk about aligning STEM with Michigan standards, making STEM work within your schools and districts, really thinking about what STEM can look like to be the most impactful for your students' learning outcomes and matching up with the priorities of your state or district as well. By way of introduction, myself, I'm Hope Thompson. I am the Senior Manager of Curriculum and Instruction at NextWave. Prior to my time with NextWave, I was an elementary science teacher in Baltimore and in Chicago public schools. And I also held roles in instruction and curriculum design for robotics pre-K through 12, which I like to mention because oftentimes we may not think about our pre-K students being included in the conversation when it comes to computer science. And it's an important reminder that I have seen firsthand coding and computer science implemented all the way from pre-K up through 12. And there's a place for every student in STEM. And there's a place for every perspective in our conversations around STEM. We want to make sure that when we design these sort of programs, we're doing that with every student in mind, regardless of their diverse needs as a learner or their developmental point in that pre-K through 12 conversation. And I'm joined by Jay Ramakrishnan. Jay, do you want to say hello?
Sorry. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. If you have any further questions, we'll have a database, and I will follow up with each one of you to give you any additional information that you require regarding STEAM CTE implementation, either at the school level or at the district level. Thank you, Hope.
Thank you, Jay. And we're also joined by Marshawn Brooks from Washtenaw ISD. Mr. Brooks, would you like to say hello as well?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me here today, Next Wave STEM. I really appreciate all the support you've done for our district.
Great. So we will all three be sharing some in the presentation today, but we'll also be in the chat. So if you have any questions throughout our conversation, please feel free to voice them in the chat. Jay and Marshawn and I will all be keeping an eye out to see how we can tailor our conversation today to what is most important and impactful for those who are joining. So to get started, I'd love to know a little bit about where you all are in your STEM approach right now, as a district, as a school, or even as a classroom. From this scale from 1 to 4, What would you say is your current approach to STEM? One being we're interested in integrating STEM. We don't yet have a STEM program. Maybe our district has just introduced it as a priority, or maybe we're starting to look from a school or classroom level. Two, I've implemented some STEM initiatives and standalone projects. We've had STEM nights at our school. Maybe we have a robotics club after school or throughout the district. Three being we have a STEM curriculum or resource. Maybe it's after school, we want to bring it into the school day. Maybe we're still building some buy-in from our teachers. We're still working to get some higher fidelity across the school or the district. And four being we have a year-round in-school STEM curriculum or program. It's for all grade levels. It is within the school day. Maybe it's been successful and you're just curious about what else is out there or how you could optimize integrating STEM into your programs. Or maybe you are wondering if there are better, more aligned approaches to STEM for your school or district. So looking, it seems we have a variety of approaches, which is great to see. We have a lot of 2s and 3s, a couple of 1s. Wonderful. Some people even getting towards 4, which is great to hear. Great. So I'm hoping by the end of our conversation, you'll have an idea or plan or an inspiration to move up the spectrum a little bit towards that next number and feel that your STEM programming is really well aligned to your school and district needs. When we surveyed schools, we found that 70% of those that we surveyed had no STEM curriculum and didn't know where to start, or maybe their teachers were creating things on the fly and holding that knowledge within the classroom or within the school, as opposed to having something that is more sustainable and able to be equitably distributed across classrooms. So our goal is really to help schools who have no STEM curriculum to see how they can bring STEM into the classroom, or help schools who have some STEM curriculum to find ways to make it more immersive, more woven into the school day, more meaningful for their students. So at Next Wave STEM, we believe that the world needs young innovators, and we offer hands-on courses in emerging technologies across 7 different pathways, which are designed to give students confidence to express creativity and learn to fail without fear. We don't want them just consuming or experiencing these technologies. We want them also using them in a design and creativity lens so that they are really in the driver's seat of developing these skills. And our goal is to empower teachers to prepare students for the future. We talk a lot about the careers of the future that more and more are arriving today. That in many cases, our students are already living in worlds with these technologies, and we have an obligation and an honor to equip them with the skills to use them safely, productively, ethically, and efficiently to support themselves and the development of society alongside these technologies. So when we talk about STEM, what do we really mean? Beyond just thinking science, technology, engineering, and math, what does it mean to bring STEM into the classroom? And we like to think of it in 3 major pillars. One being the engineering design process and the practices of someone who engages with STEM, of a scientist or an engineer. So giving students the opportunity to engage in the iterative process of identifying a problem or asking a question, imagining potential solutions, planning, especially with constraints in mind, creating and realizing that vision, and then testing it out and beginning that repeating process of improving, testing, and refining their ideas, whether they are physical innovations, a digital artifact like a code, solutions to problems that they see in the world. That process extends across just engineering and science. We see the same thing happening when our students are developing a draft, when they're writing in the writing process. It's a lot of those same skills. A second pillar is the technology and the exposure to that technology in its own right. So giving students a picture of what this outcome can look like when engineers and scientists engage in that process. The excitement and the buy-in that is built by having these sort of technologies in the classroom has its own value, but it also brings students to the relevance of developing these skills. And then finally, that third pillar are the concrete skills that students build in digital use and computer science, technology applications, things that are measurable skills we want students to have in order to be able to bring these two processes together of actually using the engineering design process and then designing digital and computer science solutions. So we bring together when we think about STEM, the process, the product, and those skills as well, so that students are getting a holistic approach to the STEM discipline. And how do we reach those STEM goals? How do we bring STEM and those three pillars to the classroom? We see that in two major ways. It can look different across all different districts, all different schools, but largely fall into these two buckets. One being standalone STEM instruction, and the other being integrating STEM into core subjects. So for standalone STEM instruction time, this can look like a STEM night, an after-school robotics club or computer science club. It can look like part of your science block being dedicated to STEM. It can look like STEM alongside art and music or as an elective. Any time that is protected and guaranteed for STEM focus, for those processes, for those technologies, or for the development of those computer science skills. Not all schools and districts have the ability right now, especially within a really crowded and busy school day, to provide that dedicated instruction within the school day without going into out of school time. So we know also that schools rely on integrating STEM into core subjects, bringing the process into other parts of their learning, bringing the technologies, or bringing the computer science skills. We're going to look at both of these examples today, and we're going to start with standalone STEM instruction. We're going to look at what an example of standalone STEM can look like. Now, in Michigan, the computer science and digital fluency standards are highly aligned to the Computer Science Teachers Association standards, and they fall under these 5 umbrellas. From K through 12, students are thinking through computing systems, so hardware, software, understanding input and output as it relates to technologies, and developing and building a repertoire of skills for troubleshooting when difficulties arise. Networks and the internet, so understanding the basis of networks transmitting electronic data, and then cybersecurity for our younger students, just understanding passwords and privacy. For our older students, really examining ethics, laws, and cybersecurity foundational skills. Data and analysis, so thinking from organizing and presenting data, interpreting and analyzing data, and especially for our older students from 6th grade up to 12th grade, using that data analysis for decision making, understanding trends and using them to predict. Algorithms and programming, really core to those computer science skills. So for the basics to think from decomposing and sequencing for our kindergartners and first graders, that can be sort of apart from the technology at first. Can you break down this process into smaller steps? Can you lay out what those steps are? With our older students, that means they may be using text-based coding to write a sequence. Testing and debugging, so students are engaging with the process of trying out a code or sequence that they have written, identifying the failures of that code and correcting them, and programming to solve problems. So writing codes that don't just help us develop those skills or create a cool digital artifact, but help respond to problems that students see in the world and can be solved through a complex program. And then the impacts of computing is that 5th umbrella that the standards are falling under for all grades K through 12, thinking through the impacts of computing technology on society and ethics, identifying bias and accessibility when using and writing programs for computing technologies, and thinking through career paths. Where do these technologies show up in the world? And what sort of roles can I envision myself in as a student later on, having developed these skills? Now, just to zoom in on a couple of them to show that progression, we can see across algorithms and programming, for example, how that basic foundational skill is deepens in complexity as students age. And also, we move through Bloom's taxonomy, thinking a little bit more deeply and higher order thinking. So for our K through 2 students, they're understanding the concept of debugging, identifying and fixing errors in a program. Versus our upper elementary students are bringing in a little bit more of testing. Their educator is not identifying for them where this has gone wrong. They are bringing in that engineering process to test and debug a program that they have written. Our 6th through 8th graders, our middle school students, are bringing a little bit more of a systematic approach to their debugging process. They're using a range of test cases. They're thinking about the use of their program from other users' perspectives and systematically debugging them. Our early 9 through 10th graders are evaluating and refining their code to make them more usable and accessible. So bringing in some of those impacts of computing, ethics, accessibility, bias as well to the debugging process that they have been engaging with since their elementary years. And our 11th and 12th graders putting it all together and increasing that specificity. So our 11th and 12th graders may be thinking more towards industry standard, more complex coding languages, the specifications of their design and what problems it's meant to solve, using different test cases to bring all of those different perspectives from the 6th through 8th and 9th through 12 to their digital artifacts. From impacts of computing, a more holistic view of the impact of technologies, these standards can look like our K through 2nd graders just thinking and comparing how people live and work with technologies and what technologies have looked like across different time periods, different uses, and students are thinking more identifying and comparing some differences there. Upper elementary students are engaging in a discussion around those computing technologies on the impact of the world and how they're influenced and are influenced by cultural practices. So widening that lens a little bit more. Middle schoolers, again, moving up Bloom's taxonomy, are comparing trade-offs. They're doing a little bit more of evaluative thinking about how technologies affect people's everyday lives, their career options, and society at large. Our 9th through 10th graders are evaluating the personal, ethical, social, economic, cultural practices that are impacted by computing. Again, widening that lens even further, deepening their thinking towards more evaluation, and moving towards the upper high school grades to prediction, how the culture and how the technologies may evolve as a result of these innovations, bringing that to the thinking that they've done in previous years to more forward lens, looking at outside of the school environment, thinking towards careers, society at large. How does the information help us to do some critical thinking and make predictions? So when we're thinking through a STEM standalone program, you really want to start by thinking about those targeted areas that your STEM is meant to support. Whether you want to bring STEM in with an arts connection, focusing on things like 3D design, or you want to have more of a career and technical education focus, especially for our middle and high schoolers. What sort of technologies are we exposing them to that also help prepare them for careers in these industries? What skills will be immediately supportive to students and marketable in a landscape that is rapidly evolving? Maybe it is part of a computer science program. We see a lot of schools who introduce computer science as a special or an essential alongside art and music or within their library and media offerings. And they want to really focus in on those algorithmic programming skills, building sequences, deepening the complexity of those algorithms that students are writing, using them to solve problems. Or maybe you have a makerspace and you're looking to introduce a program that is sustainable for a great new space in your school. You want students to be focusing on that engineering and design process, both in the physical and digital spaces, thinking about the relationship between some of those coding skills, the innovative development of digital artifacts, and how that comes together in a 3D space as well. So identifying these categories that are most important to your school or district can help you hone in on what specific aspects of STEM you'd like to focus on in a landscape that is ever expanding and can be quite daunting. So for example, here are Next Wave STEM's 7 pathways that we focus on. And depending on the category that you're looking to focus on, the standards that from those 5 buckets that we saw that you want each course that you're offering your students to align with, a different pathway may be most appropriate. All 7 of these are going to touch on different aspects of those computer science and digital fluency standards. Whether robotics, drones, AI, those sort of programs that may build those computer science skills, 3D technology, a great way to engage in the engineering design process, but also build fluency when using design softwares. Innovation, entrepreneurship, helping students to see how innovative thinking paired with some of these skills can develop new and creative solutions. And sustainability, similarly working to show how the engineering design process extends beyond the digital space, how it shows up in life sciences, sustainability, and how it relates to issues that are very important to our students, like climate change. And so we can see, especially with programs that are more interdisciplinary, the interplay of those 3 pillars that we started with across STEM, the process, the product of the technology, and the skills. We're going to look specifically, as an example, at a robotics program about how that can go from K through 12 within a school or district that has dedicated standalone STEM time, what that progression looks like across K through 12. So for example, our K through 2 students can begin to practice those decomposing sequences, even just in storytelling, before we introduce a technology. They are working through what are the steps to brush your teeth in the morning? Can you write a sequence for your robot partner, another student in the class who is going to follow those instructions exactly as you've written them? And then students can begin with some simple technologies that give them an opportunity to visualize how a digital or a computer can hold on to and can hold on to electronic data and how that input can show up in the real world. So students are using the Colby mouse to write a sequence without engaging in a second software just yet, just by placing a program before students or a problem in front of students that requires a simple program. Our Colby mouse robot needs to get to the cheese. Can you use the buttons directly on this robot to write that program? Notice how that robot will not run the program until you press the run button, and then it follows the sequence as you put it in, not just button by button. So students get to practice with those skills while also covering some core skills like drawing numbers, telling stories, breaking those stories down into beginning, middle, and end, and practicing some of those basic coding skills. So just a couple of those specific computer science standards that I've pulled here, modeling how programs store and manipulate data by using numbers or other symbols. So even our pre-readers are using symbols to write an algorithm. And developing programs with sequences, even introducing simple loops to express ideas or solve problems. For our 3rd through 5th graders, we can bring in a little bit more complexity when it comes to the software that they are coding with. So they can begin to code with a block-based coding program, using blocks like puzzle pieces to construct a program that helps to exemplify a feature of a robot that they have built. So maybe they are using a block-based program to make a dance sequence for their robot that lights up and goes in circles, or they are competing with their classmates to park in a parking space that their teacher has taped out on the floor. So they're getting a little bit more exposure to the coding foundations through a block program. And they're also getting to practice engaging in that testing and debugging process. They are working with their peers to collaborate. They're also bringing in additional commands like loops and conditional thinking, working with if-then processes. So that standard is getting more specific in those skills. And as a result, our students' programs are getting a little bit more complex. For 6th through 8th graders, we want to make that connection between the skills that we've built and the use of these skills and these technologies in the real world. So how can we bring in a little bit more problem solving and a little bit more connection to start to bring in that CTE approach as well, where students can see themselves in careers past the classroom. They're thinking about creating programs using if-then conditional thinking to respond to and avoid objects. Can you code a program to have your robot independently move through a maze? Can you combine your skills in design of the program and design of a competition to write your own challenge for your classmates to solve and create with their robot? Again, I've grabbed a couple of those specific standards here just to show how that some of those standards really carry over. So they're going to look very similar the way that they build on from previous grades, but they also incorporate new aspects like refining solutions using user feedback. Maybe they're working a little bit more deeply in the debugging process with regard to the problems that they're trying to solve. Not just does my robot do what I thought it was going to do, but does it solve the problem that I had designed it to solve? And for our 9th through 12th graders, we can really broaden the lens into career exploration. Students are looking at how these sort of robotics and automation show up in manufacturing. So what do these careers look like? How can these skills that I develop now relate to these careers and interests I have? Students may develop with some more of a basis in those block coding skills. They may develop skills in text-based coding like Python. They may be marrying some of these skills with their interests in developing solutions in a 3D space, thinking about that maker space. How can I combine this with other aspects and elements to create a solution to a problem that is not just digital? So, for example, at Next Wave, our automation for manufacturing program, students are combining a microbit with different color sensors, conveyor belts, different motors to simulate and replicate some of the processes we see in manufacturing and in factories across the world. So, for example, they use the microbit, a color sensor, a sorting wand, and a conveyor belt to create a simulation of a sorting belt where if M&Ms come down the line, red ones are sorted to the left bucket and green ones are sorted to the right, and so on. So we're making those connections not just to the computer science skills, but to CTE and engineering. Basic computer science and engineering, certainly, but also the connection of those two. So depending on the CTE programs that your school or district is promoting, is looking into developing, is already has robust programs in, these sort of skills can play into a lot of different areas. It isn't just a robotics program for robotics' sake, but we can see it across different industries how this sort of automation can be meaningful. And that not only prepares students for a variety of careers, but it also helps them see how these skills don't push them in just one direction, but can follow their passions as well. So for a little bit of perspective on what that can look like in one particular district, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Marshawn Brooks to share a little bit about what that STEM approach has been with Next Wave and Washtenaw ISD.
Hey, thanks a lot, Hope. I really appreciate that introduction. So, first of all, I'll give you a precursor and a little bit of understanding of what we're doing here in Washtenaw County. We're creating an aviation-focused pathway from pre-K through ninth grade with an aviation-approved, state-approved pathway for our 11th and 12th grade. So I'll give you a little overview of how that looks for us here in Washtenaw County. So we found that Next Wave STEM, it weaves drone technology into multiple subjects, allowing schools to introduce aviation concepts in a lot of different ways, whether that be science and engineering introduction and integration, and we'll talk about a few things of how that looks. Drones, they model next-gen standards, aligned learning. We learn about aerodynamics, force and flight, and energy transfer. Also, Next Wave STEM's focused on energy design, cycling, using drones, and assembling calibrations and testing the drones as well, which gives the kids a lot of hands-on experience. Now, also with this, it allows students to apply scientific inquiries as they build, modify, and test the drone systems. One thing about this that really resonated with me as a former classroom computer science teacher is that Next Wave does a phenomenal job of scaffolding up from kindergarten all the way up to their ninth grade, which lessons tie into each other. Now, how do we use drones with our technology and coding and robotics? Well, students explore how the drone operates. They code autonomous flights and paths. They understand sensors and GPS and onboard system, as Hope alluded to earlier. And then they troubleshoot that and go back and optimize that to make that performance even better. Now, as we continue on with this aligns with the computer science standards and preparing students for robotics and mechatronics pathways. Also, Next Wave STEM does a phenomenal job at mathematics and data literacy. Teachers can integrate drones into mathematic instructions by using flight trajectory calculations, distance rates and angle measurements, mapping, and geodata to ensure for analyzing the real world problem sets. Now, what does this do? Well, that helps the students to see mathematics as applied hands-on tools. Now, I'll get into our nitty-gritty of this. Now, we're really CTE focused here in Washtenaw County, and Next Wave STEM does a phenomenal job of introducing students to the unmanned UAS flight Part 107D, connecting to learning career tracks in engineering, aerospace, public safety, construction, and environmental services, because it allows for teachers to be able to take their drones up and test air quality, test different airspeeds and wind drifts within the county before they go on to different types of curriculums. Now, one thing too that Next Wave does a phenomenal job is across cross-discipline project-based learning, right? STEM, as you know, has a big focus on saving people, responding to disasters, that with their aviation for disaster response simulations, environmental monitoring using aerial photographs of looking for lost people, looking for lost objects out in the wood using heat sensor on top of their drones and different things of that nature. Mapping schools or community spaces, humanitarian missions, getting blood into remote places up in the UP, or getting gas into remote places up in the peninsula of Michigan. It teaches kids all of those real world experiences that takes. Now, the last thing I'll leave with is the support, the equity and access. Next Wave STEM is committed to expanding opportunities for economically disadvantaged students, Black and Hispanic learners, district with limited engineering or CTE pathways, and drone and aviation education provides an exciting, accessible entry point into high wage and high demand careers. And that's how we're using Next Wave STEM here in Washtenaw County. And we're also looking at other ways to use Next Wave STEM as well. But this relationship has been phenomenal. We have teachers in Bishop Elementary right now using the MBOTs. We're rolling it out over at Brick Elementary here soon, where second graders will be using drones to test them out, the cross content collaboration. And if it's anybody that's in Washtenaw County, you can reach out to me or my boss Ryan Rowe, and we'll be able to set you up and put you in the right direction as far as next wave STEM, if that's something you want to do. Thanks a lot, Hope.
Thank you so much, Marshawn. So it's great to hear, as ever, all the different ways that Washtenaw is making the most of Next Wave and how we've been able to partner, especially with respect to our drones programming. That's a particularly exciting topic, as I'm sure many of the educators in our webinar here today know. It's something that really energizes and engages students, but we also know it opens doors for a variety of different careers. So that's just one really great example of what that protected standalone STEM priority can look like within a district in Michigan. We hope that that does give some perspective on just one or two versions of what that can look like. But we're happy to help jump in and support schools however they want to realize standalone STEM time in their districts. However, we also know that not all schools have the ability to practice STEM as its own subject within the school day, or separated from science and separated from ELA and math, especially at the elementary level. It's really tough to find those minutes. So we also know a lot of schools and districts, the best way to make STEM happen is to integrate it into the core subjects. What we don't want to happen is for schools and districts and teachers to say, I don't have time for STEM in the day, so it's going to go by the wayside. The most important thing is that we find ways to bring in those three pillars of STEM somewhere in the school day, in the classroom, to expose all students to the process, the technologies, and the skills. For many schools, we can make that happen within a science program, bringing a little bit of STEM into core science, especially as it relates to the engineering standards through NGSS. Because Michigan is a state that recognizes them, that gives you a little bit more flexibility to use your core science time to explore the engineering design process, especially. But we also see it happen in ELA and math. Using drones to practice the use of coordinates on a plane, using AI to design a chatbot that acts just like the character from our novel study. And how can we use a chatbot to practice things like tone? Can my students be designing with these computer science skills, interactive AI, one that is very knowledgeable and helpful, and one that is playful and silly, understanding some writing standards as well. So there's a variety of ways that we can bring STEM into core subjects. Our knowledge of how to do so is really only limited by our understanding of these technologies. And we know that teachers have enough on their plate. They have a busy schedule. They have plenty to do. Staying up to date on the latest cutting edge technologies may not be something that's realistic to expect teachers to do independently. So that's where we come in and giving a little bit more perspective on these technologies and how they can come into the classroom in ways that are already represented in your schedule. So one way that we can make that happen, just as a single example of bringing a technology into the core subjects, is thinking through life science and plant science standards. This is something that extends from K through 12 across your school and district. Everyone is engaging with plant science in some capacity. Just as an example, a snapshot of what this looks like at different levels. Kindergartners, what do plants and animals need to survive? Our second graders, planning investigations, so bringing in more of those scientific practices to determine if they need sunlight and water. Fifth graders, supporting arguments, doing a little bit of claim evidence and reasoning that plants get the materials they need, primarily from air and water. And then our middle schoolers, constructing explanations based on evidence for how environmental and genetic factors influence the growth of organisms. We're going to relate that specifically to the environmental factors that impact the growth of plants. And then our high schoolers in biology are designing, evaluating, and refining solutions for reducing the impacts of student activities on the environment and on biodiversity. So how can we bring in a little bit more of those innovative ideas to the life science classroom? Where do those products of the engineering design process show up? One technology that brings this relevance across K through 12 is a hydroponic shelving system. There is a way for students to engage with this technology that relates to each of those standards that I just went through. And that was just a snapshot. Every level, every grade between those grades we just looked at has life science environmental impact standards that can be enhanced by the use of a technology such as this. So with a very low impact commitment, this is maybe 2 feet by 1 feet in the classroom, provides a lot of opportunity for students to conduct experiments, to control variables, to see the results of the scientific explanations that they are constructing, and also see how some of those innovative ideas that sometimes we sort of think of only in the digital space, technology as it relates to drones, robots, computer science programming, that same process of developing technologies and engaging with the engineering design process relates to other disciplines as well. We see it show up in life science and sustainability. It isn't always going to be happening just on a screen. And this provides students with a great opportunity to have analog, hands-on experience to innovation that isn't tied just to those computer science skills. So for our youngest learners, a single hydroponic system gives them an opportunity to isolate some of the same skills that they are practicing in their science classroom. What are the parts of a plant and what do plants need? At Next Wave, our hydroponics course includes things like relouds, experiments, pollination and seed dispersal, other topics that are covered alongside the development of understanding that plants chiefly do need that air, water, and nutrients, but soil is less required than perhaps we may originally think. That as long as students get those as long as plants get those nutrients and a physical structure to hold on to, we can control for other variables. So students get a little bit of a broadening of their understanding than they would get in a traditional plant life unit. It's also a great way to breathe new life into what can be a tired unit for teachers who have been teaching these K through 2 levels year over year. And it does have a little bit more control. I can confirm that we do both alongside, but the hydroponics unit growing is a little bit more consistent than the traditional seed on a wet paper towel in a bag by the window, which is beloved. As someone who taught it myself, does have a place alongside the hydroponic system, but it is a great way to show some of the variability of environmental factors. Our 3rd through 5th graders are getting a lot of experience and a perfect lab to practice with scientific observation skills, data collection, experiment design, some of those scientific practices that show up at the 3rd through 5th grade level, especially when they start to construct their own ideas of themselves as a scientist and what practices are involved. So they're getting to control things like plant nutrients, they're getting to measure pH, understanding how those environmental factors show up in a controlled environment, and we can extrapolate to the larger world. Our middle schoolers with that same hydroponic system are again rooting these technologies in problem solving and impacts on the world around them. So how do hydroponic systems and similar innovations provide solutions to real world problems like food insecurity and resource availability? One major culminating project of our 6th through 8 course is students designing a hydroponic system to sustain astronauts on a space travel program. So how are we pairing these technologies, the same skills we've developed, with the innovative impact on our culture and society? And then our high schoolers, again, we want to be pushing them towards those career and technical impacts and those perspectives on where these skills direct me towards different interests, different passions, and different careers. So our 9th through 12th graders are thinking about hydroponics in the context of agricultural science, how it shows up alongside sustainability, agribusiness. Students in this program are growing wheatgrass. They're then blending wheatgrass into a health drink, and then they're designing a business plan to bring that health drink to market. So finding the interplay of these innovations across industries helps to show students how the skills relate to careers elsewhere, but also shows that when we develop as STEM engineers or scientists in those skills and in that content knowledge, we're not doing it in a bubble. We're doing it with the intention of bringing those developments, those innovations to the larger world and seeing their impact and predicting where we might go next. So as for our next wave STEM materials, I really like to be specific about this because I know as an educator, this is the bottom line. What quality of materials are we talking about? And Next Wave STEM is very meticulous about our standards alignment and making sure that everything that we provide for teachers is immediately able to be implemented, is high quality, is aligned with standards that are relevant to your school, state, district, and your students first and foremost. Our standards, our lesson plans are standards aligned to Michigan Science and Technology standards. They have ELA and math supported as well for those programs that are more integrated and need to make sure STEM time is also underscoring some of those core subjects. ISTE and CSTA standards, as we covered, they're very similar to the Michigan State standards, but also we get those 21st century skills. Students are getting opportunities throughout all of our programs to collaborate, to be creative, to practice critical thinking, and to communicate their ideas, their solutions, and their feedback to their peers. I also want to add that Next Week STEM is eligible through millage funding so that your schools can secure high quality programs such as ours. Every one of those courses that we looked at in our course chart, which we'll look at and again in just a moment, every one of these boxes, when we talk about a course, is a 15 lesson core. Many of our lessons, as the technology has developed, have also gotten supplementary materials. So some of our courses go up to 20 lessons as well. That includes a course guide, foundational documents like a scope and sequence. It's going to go lesson by lesson through all of your objectives. What standards are covered here? Of the multiple, the state standards, the national standards, the larger STEM guidance like ISTE. It's also going to include 15 teacher's guides that are highly, highly supportive. I call them just short of scripted. They are really supportive for all teachers who are implementing our courses. We know that you all are the experts on the pedagogy and how you're going to implement these strategies in your classroom. Our job is to bring you that content in a way that is not another thing for teachers to think about. If you have educators who are experts in computer science or passionate about hydroponics and they know this content really well, they can use our lesson plans as a guidance for sure. But if you have teachers, especially if you're looking to build buy-in, if STEM has recently become a priority, or you've formerly had a lot of teachers holding institutional knowledge that is not necessarily shared across the school or district, these lesson plans or teacher's guides, as we call them, can be followed to the letter for teachers who are maybe less familiar with this content, as well as following our professional development offerings. We have a self-paced library of videos, supportive documents, coding models and examples so that teachers who are maybe engaging with this content for the first time or are brushing up on the cutting edge of technologies can feel supported both as a content leader for their students, but also as a facilitator for the learning activities of the course. This is also going to include formative and summative assessments in the form of student worksheets, answer keys, pre and post tests. We really have been striving at Next Wave STEM to make sure our offerings are comprehensive. This is a one-stop shop for all of the needs that a teacher may have in implementing a STEM course. All of these are hosted on our online teaching portal. They are accessible to teachers in a variety of modes. We have editable versions if you want to integrate it into your existing course materials. We also have ongoing support, so a weekly office hour where a member of our team is able to receive any teachers who want to drop in and ask questions to troubleshoot software, hardware, talk through instructional strategies, brush up on questions on the content. We provide that weekly support so that this is something that our teachers feel is supportive, exciting to implement, a lot of fun for their students while giving them that standards alignment, and doesn't become something that can be daunting, especially as it relates to the technologies. So I want to give us one more look at our course chart. You can see again along the top those 7 pathways: robotics, drones, AI literacy, helping students to build an understanding of what AI is. It's ethical, effective, and safe use. 3D tech and design, innovation and entrepreneurship, really highlighting how those engineering skills have developed in new ways in our world. Sustainability, how those innovations relate to a more sustainable practice, especially as it relates to life science. And game design, a course that I'm very jealous I didn't get to take as a 3rd through 8th grader, designing and playing and testing their very own video games. Many of these courses, we can work with the materials that are already in your building. If you have a 3D printer and you're not sure what to do with it, our curriculum is device agnostic, and we can customize it specifically to what technology you already have within your district. We can also work with you to build out a suite of programs that meet the priorities of your school or district. If you really want to bring in that arts connection, we have a menu of programs that have a little bit more of that creativity and arts connection. Or if you want that CTE focus, our 6 through 8 and 9 through 12 courses that really focus in on CTE, or as we heard in Washtenaw, has that certification aspect. So our 9 through 12 drone certification that prepares students to sit for an FAA drone pilot exam. Computer science, certainly in those AI, robotics, game design courses, students really can hone in on the algorithmic thinking, sequencing, testing, and debugging across block and later text programming. And makerspace, whether you have a makerspace and you want to make sure that your curriculum is robust enough to support the educators in that space, or you're looking to launch a makerspace, you're looking for the materials and the curriculum together. We're happy to help design custom bundles to put together a program that is really tailored to the needs of your students. And I want to leave you with a link to our curriculum samples. We are so proud of how supportive, standards aligned, and high quality our content is. And I really want to encourage you to take a look as an educator myself, and for all the educators here in our session. I know that is the bottom line, is the quality of materials and instruction that our students will be receiving. So if you follow this link or head to our website, you can download curriculum samples. You can also set up a time to meet with Jay and talk through what kind of program design is best for your school and your students. There's nothing more that I love than really diving in the weeds with teachers to figure out what the best program design is for your school. We're more than happy to dedicate some time to looking through our curriculum samples, our standards alignment, and the goals of your program to make sure that we are the most supportive STEM program that we can be. I want to thank you all so much for joining us today, for sharing a little bit about your approach in the chat. And thanks as well to Marshawn Brooks for giving a great example of what STEM can look like, really exemplary STEM programming with that CTE focus in Michigan. Please feel free to leave any questions in the chat. So stick around for a couple minutes. Jay and I will be around keeping an eye on the chat and staying in for just a moment. But if you would like to reach out, please check out this link in our website or the link to meet with Jay. She has dropped in the chat as well. Thank you all so much. I hope to hear from you soon.
Thank you, Hope.
And if we don't have any questions in the chat, or if you want to come off mute, you're welcome to. Then I will let you know that our recording will be emailed out to you for your reference as well. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.